Hello, I'm Helen Good and I'm part of the Elizabethan Star Chamber project, which is trying to make sense of the National Archives class STAC 5. And I am once again joined by some of the wonderful and talented members of the Beyond Shakespeare Company who have kindly agreed to read some more Star Chamber with me. Today, as it is nearly Christmas, I have a present for our readers because the case today is Allen and Burbage from 1603. So first, may I introduce our readers? The first reader and first clerk is...
Hi, I'm Eric, and like plants, I need water.
The second reader and second clerk is...
Hi, Rachael, actor on the East Coast.
The third reader and Richard Lane is...
Hi, I'm Greg, and I'm insanely excited about this.
The fourth reader and the final clerk is...
Sarah Blake, actor, writer and director based in Germany.
All right, well, we start as we usually do with the bill of complaint in Allen and Burbage, 1603. Take it away, Eric.
To the Queen's most excellent Majesty, in most humble wise, complaining showeth unto your most excellent Majesty, your Highness obedient and faithful subject, Giles Allen of Hazeley, in your Highness County of Essex, gentlemen, that whereas your subject, together with Sarah his wife, were did heretofore by an indenture bearing date the 13th day of April in the 18th year of your Highness' reign, demise unto one James Burbage, late of London, joiner, certain housing and void grounds lying and being in Holywell in the county of Middlesex, for the term of 21 years, then next following, for the yearly rent of £14, wherein it was covenanted on the part of your subject and Sarah his wife to make a new lease of the premises to James Burbage or his assigns at any time within the first 10 years upon his request for the term of 21 years from the making thereof. And it was by the same indenture covenanted in the part of James Burbage that he or his assigns should within those first 10 years bestow the sum of £200 in altering and amending of the buildings there. The value of, yes, in consideration of which sum of £200 so to be bestowed. It was covenanted on the part of your subject that it should be lawful for James Burbage and his assigns at any time within the first 10 years granted or within the 21 years by virtue of the covenant aforesaid to be granted to take down such building as should within those 10 years be erected on the void ground for a theatre or playing place.
Okay. So does anyone want to say what is happening so far? Eric didn't read, I quite correctly, in fact. I had put in square brackets a date. The 13th day of April in the 18th year of your Highness' reign is 1575. So that is when the land is first leased to James Burbage. And it's a 10-year lease with an option to renew for a further 21. And it is a repairing lease, so he's got to spend a minimum of £200 in altering and repairing the existing buildings. And there's also some empty space, void ground. And he can presumably build and take down. Or maybe he can take down other buildings. but he can build a theatre or playing place. Sarah.
Yes, so because I wasn't quite certain about that. So there's no theatre. There was no theatre there when he took it on. He has the right to build a theatre on the space, or presumably on the void space, but then he also has the right to take it down.
I'm not sure that isn't to take down some buildings in order to
okay,
make more space, you know, put the
Okay.
loos in and the car parking and all the other things you need, because you need quite a bit of space around a theatre for
yeah,
hot dog stalls.
very important. So it's like so it's not. It wasn't 21 years to begin with. It was just 10.
It was a 10 years
10
with an
years.
option to renew
Right.
for 21.
Right. So an option to renew for 21 at the end of the 10 years, or
Presumably, yes.
Right,
But he
okay.
could, it meant that any time during the 10, he could say, yes, I'm here for the duration, let's make it 21.
right. Okay.
Let's add on. Eric.
So basically, in the first 10 years, the rent was £14 per year. And then afterwards, after purchase or something, the sum of £200 in altering and amending of the buildings there is for the buildings. Yeah, that's the part I'm confused about.
The £200, he's taking a repairing lease. It's obviously quite a large plot because there are already buildings on it.
Yeah.
So he is guaranteeing that he will spend £200 on repairs and renewals.
Yeah, yeah.
It's
Okay.
what they call a repairing lease. All these covenants. Rachel, were you? Yeah.
So the £200, who gave the £200 to who? Or was it expected of James Burbage to at some point during the lease use £200 to use in maintenance and upkeep of the building created?
Well, of the buildings existing.
Of the building, okay.
As I understand it. I don't say I'm right here, but I'm just saying that that's the way I read it. But if anybody has any other ideas. All right, everybody happy so far? Yep. Okay. Reader number 2, please.
And afterwards, within those 10 years, a theater was then and there erected at the costs and charges of one Brains, and not of James Burbage, to the value of 1,000 marks. And James Burbage did then within those 10 years tender unto your subject a draft of a new lease of the premises, requiring your subject to seal the same, which your subject refused to do, by reason that the draft so tendered varied much from the covenants in the former lease. And also for that James Burbage had before that time assigned all his interest and term in those premises unto one John High, and had also been a very bad and troublesome tenant unto your subject, so that your subject was in no wise bound either law or conscience to seal the same.
All right, now where are we? Does anyone want to say what they think happened next? Sarah?
So Burbage builds a theatre, which presumably was expected, but he doesn't pay for it himself. Someone called Brains pays for it. And then he then says, oh, right now I'm ready to extend the lease. And Alan won't do that because the original term, because the lease that he's drawn up, the new terms are so different to the original lease. Is this to do with the fact that someone else, so he took on a repairing lease, but he hasn't actually spent the money, someone else has done it?
Well, no, we don't know about the repairing at this stage. We
Okay.
do know about the theatre. 1,000 marks is possibly £666, 13 shillings and 4pence. But somebody, this guy Brains, has put the money in to build the theatre. But Burbage has also assigned his value in the whole property to someone called Hyde. This is according to Alan. It needn't necessarily be true.
What does that mean precisely?
Well, supposing you have a lease on a property, but you can't pay the rent and you don't want it, you can sell your interest in it to somebody else who's got money. I mean, what this whole thing says to me is that as a theatre owner, James Burbage is seriously undercapitalized. Also, Alan's gone off him. Rachael.
No, I was gonna say, like, it's like the guy co-signed the lease with him almost by putting up the money, and I think the guy might be refusing. I don't know if he's voided the terms of the contract, but he might be refusing because I think he's afraid that the guy, having brought up so much debt and having called somebody in, means that he can't pay for whatever extension on the lease.
You may very well be correct. It doesn't say that, but it's a possible supposition.
So Burbage is trying to, or has basically sold on his lease to Hyde, and
Or
so
lent it out,
or kind of, yeah, or something. I mean, I'm just trying to think about it in modern terms. In modern terms, you would buy the remaining years of a lease.
Yes.
And so actually the extension would kind of be with Hyde, not with Burbage. And presumably that's what Alan is objecting to as well, the fact that he's not dealing with the same person. But then if he doesn't like Burbage, he wouldn't care about that, I wouldn't have thought.
Well, no. I mean, he's saying that the Burbage had submitted this extended lease, but the terms were all different. So he didn't have to sign it. He's gone off Burbage entirely and has decided he's a bad tenant. And also, Burbage isn't running the thing himself. He's subbed it out to somebody else.
Too rowdy, probably. They probably live next door and they're like, oh my God, we had no idea this theatre was going to be so rowdy.
That's a possibility. But in fact, he lives in Hazelhurst or somewhere.
Oh yeah.
Or he says he does. I mean, I'm getting very cynical about what people say in Star Chamber. Eric.
My question is, who would they appeal to? Because, like, for example, one of them is meant to be in the county of Essex and the other one is meant to be in the county of Middlesex, which are not exactly next door to each other as far as my geography of knowledge of the UK is not great, but I mean, yeah, where do they appeal straight to? Like, would this just be sent straight to London? Would it be sent to Greenwich? Would it be sent to where was this sent to, appealed to?
Well, this, in fact, the whole thing starts off, I'm getting ahead of myself a bit, in the King's Bench, which is in Middlesex. Now, the interesting thing about the King's Bench is the King's Bench is the place you went to where you couldn't find or you couldn't pin down the other party, or you weren't sure where they were, because the King's Bench in Middlesex had jurisdiction over the entire country. So you say, we don't know where he is, but he's probably in Middlesex, and King's Bench would take it. I think the technical phrase was lurking and running about. So, but in fact, being the property in question is in Middlesex. So lurking, he doesn't need to say they're lurking and running about. He just says it all happens in Middlesex, and the King's Bench will take it. Star Chamber, of course, will take anything, England or Wales. By this time, Ireland had their own. It was called the Court of Castle Chamber, and it was in Dublin Castle, which is why you never get any Irish cases in Star Chamber. Or possibly you wouldn't anyway, but there you go. All right. Whoever's turn it is next, go for it.
And afterwards, Hyde conveyed all his interest and tenure in the premises onto one Cuthbert Burbage, the son of James Burbage, who, being desirous still to make gain in the theatre, suffered the same there to continue till the expiration of the term, whereby the right and interest of the theatre was both in law and conscience absolutely vested in your subject.
So, I don't know what's going on.
Is this whole thing a scam? Has he transferred the lease to Hyde so that Hyde can then transfer it to his son? Is this some way of, like, it's not tax evasion exactly, but is this some sort of way of wriggling round a legal?
I think we may find it's debt evasion.
Okay, that makes sense.
But Cuthbert is keen to make a go of the theatre.
Bless him.
He thinks it may have a future. Who knows? Who knows?
Poor fool.
Well, quite. I mean, the plague was, yes, there was a big plague a little later than this. What I don't know is what year this happened in, because it should be, let me see, it should be 85. But it obviously isn't. So I think they have bumbled along without a formal lease. So the 10 years is up, but they're still there. And if they're still paying rent, but there's no formal lease. That's the impression I'm getting. Yeah, because it certainly is late. This is certainly later than 85, which would be the 10-year cutoff.
Mm.
All right, and it's Sarah's turn, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Whereupon your subject, seeing the great and grievous abuses that grew by that theatre, intended to pull down the same, and to convert the wood and timber thereof to some better use for the benefit of your subject, which your subject had just cause to do, the rather for that your subject had no other means to be relieved for £30 arrearages of rents, which James Burbage in his lifetime did owe unto your subject for the premises, and for the breach of divers covenants in not repairing the houses and otherwise. For that James Burbage had, in his lifetime, made a deed of gift of all his goods to Cuthbert Burbage and Richard Burbage, his sons, who, after the death of James Burbage, procured Helen Burbage, his widow, being a very poor woman, to take the administration upon her, which was done to the intent to defraud your subject and other creditors of James Burbage.
Okay. Now, I don't say we've got the Burbage's motivation, but we've got one person's view of the Burbage's motivation. I'm not saying that Ellen, widow of James, is the victim in this. It may all have been her idea. But it's a very old trick to divide the capital from the debts. So the debts fall where they can't be repaid, and the capital stays clear of the debts. Rachael.
So what does this mean? Who got the capital in this and who got the debts in this? Can you tell from this passage?
Well, according to Alan, who is not a reliable witness, Cuthbert and Richard, by deed of gift, got the capital, what James owned, and what James owed stayed with his estate. Now, if it had all passed in his will, then on administration of the estate, the debts would have been taken out of the property before James and, well, Cuthbert got his hands on it. But by making a lifetime gift, I mean, nowadays there are many, many laws that prevent this sort of fun and games, but not if you're rich enough, they don't. But this way, Cuthbert, Giles Allen says, James, he wasn't the only creditor, that James, by this devious means, managed to defraud. Yes, but Richard Burbage gets a mention. Hooray! Okay.
I love the fact that it's his brother Cuthbert who is the one who wants to keep the theatre going.
Yeah, Cuthbert seems to be the business manager.
Cuthbert's Anyway, sorry, that's by the by.
No, it's certainly not by the by. I mean, part of the whole thing about this is that we're looking at the genesis of the theatre. And so, because we know some of these people involved in other contexts, then that's very, very valid to stick it into the mix. Were they the sort of people who would defraud Giles Allen? Who knows? Okay, so who's next?
But so it is, if it may please your excellent majesty, that Cuthbert Burbage, having intelligence of your subject's purpose herein, and unlawfully combining and confederating himself with Richard Burbage and one Peter Streete, William Smyth, and divers other persons to the number of 12, to your subject unknown, did about the 8 and 20th day of December in the 1 and 40th year of your reign, and silence and sith hence your highness last general pardon, by the confederacy aforesaid riotously assemble themselves together, and there armed themselves with diverse and many unlawful and offensive weapons, as namely swords, daggers, bills, axes, and the like. And so armed did then repair unto that theatre, and then and there armed as aforesaid in very riotous, outrageous, and forcible manner, and contrary to the laws of your highness realm, attempted to pull down the theatre, whereupon divers of your subject servants then went about in peaceable manner to procure them to desist from that their unlawful enterprise. The riotous persons aforesaid, notwithstanding procured then were therein with great violence, not only then and there forcibly and riotously resisting your subjects, servants, and farmers, but also then and there pulling and breaking down the theatre and throwing down the theatre in very outrageous, violent, and riotous sort, to the great disturbance and terrifying not only of your subject servants and farmers, but of diverse others of your majesty's loving subjects there near habiting. And having so done, did then also in most forcible and righteous manner take and carry away from thence all the wood and timber thereof unto the backside in the parish of St. Mary Overies, and there erected a new playhouse with the timber and wood.
Right, that is the story we know. And I would say that having read a number of these Star Chamber cases, I do not believe in these swords and bucklers. I am not entirely sure I believe it was riotous. I also don't believe, and I'm sorry to say this, that he was assisted by poets, playwrights, and actors. I think he had a team of joiners and house carpenters. Sorry about that. I deeply apologize to every bardolator that has ever lived. Sarah.
At the beginning of that speech, I was like, well, what is going on here? Because he was going to pull down the theatre anyway. So why is he fussed that anyone else is pulling down the theatre? And then it got to the bit where they carted the timber off to build a new theatre somewhere else, and I'm like, okay, I understand what all of this is about. It's about the materials, it's about the value of the timber and okay, so that's basically what he's here for, and they're just basically trying to keep their theatre going somewhere.
Eric, you were waving.
You know, I was just processing like the whole sort of, why would you use swords, daggers, bills, and axes in order to tear down a building? I mean, that doesn't even make sense. And also you would destroy well, axes maybe, but I mean, kind of you would destroy the materials as, you know, which is the thing that, you know, was most coveted, I assume, in doing so. So you would just need like sort of hammers and some other things, not well, not screwdrivers, but I mean, you know, something equivalent. So there's a part of me going, why would you say this? But I did enjoy how it's kind of, it happened on the 28th day of December in the 40th year. So it's like he's been complaining for several years, I'm guessing, or this has been happening. Like this sort, no, I mean the sort of, it started off in the 21st year of her reign, and or 25th year of her reign, and now we're in the 40th year of her reign, 41st. And Sith has your Highness last general pardon, so you can't arrest them like last time you pardoned people. Yeah, I know.
Yeah, these are misdemeanors that took place since the last general pardon, so they're still misdemeanors. Rachael and then Sarah.
Yeah, I think this passage is, I think this guy's really trying to get back that money that he feels is somehow indebted to him in any way possible, you know, and the sale of that timber might make it up, but it's, even though the debt for that theater's been evaded by the gift, and he's looking, now that it's changed legal ownership into the hands of the sons of the guy who owes him the debt, he's trying, you know, to use this, the talking about the riotous dismantling of it to reacquire the ownership that he feels over the timber, not tinder.
I hesitate to say this. Greg, is this living up to your expectations?
Oh, yes.
It is. Good, good. I'm glad about that because you hadn't said anything, so I worried that you might be disappointed. All right. So they carried it away to the bankside and erected a new playhouse with the timber and wood. I'm not a theatre historian. What playhouse are we talking about? Do we know?
I I always thought it was the globe.
The Great Globe itself.
Yeah, maybe I'm wrong.
Oh. Good-o. Sarah.
Or could it have been the rose?
Was Burbage involved in the rose? I thought not.
Oh.
Oh, maybe he was. Maybe he was.
Oh,
As I say,
can't
I'm not a
remember. I
theatre
know
historian.
the rose was before the globe, wasn't it? So, oh, I this is the kind of stuff that I used to know once upon a time, but it was such a long time ago. I don't remember any of it, so I honestly don't know.
What we
Probably was the
need
globe.
is Lois Potter. She'd put us
Yes,
right.
she would know.
Rachael. No, she's passed. Okay, are we ready for the next episode? Go for it.
Whereupon your subject and Hilary term following did commence an action of trespass against Peter Streete in your Highness Court at Westminster, commonly called the King's Bench, for wrongful entering into your subject's grounds and pulling down and taking away of the theatre. Howbeit Cuthbert Burbage, maliciously intending to vex and molest your subject, an Easter term following exhibited a bill unto your Highness against your subject in your Highness Court of Requests, pretending matter of equity for the stay of your subjects suit at the common law, whereunto your subject appeared and made answer. And afterwards in Trinity term, in the 41st year of your Highness reign, an order was conceived and then published and pronounced by your Highness Council of that court, by the consent of your subject, that your subject's suit at the common law should stay till the cause in equity were heard in the Court of Request, which was appointed to be in Michaelmas term following. Yet the demurrer, which was formerly joined in the suit between your subject and Peter Streete, might be made up, which was expressly granted and allowed by that order upon the special motion and desire of your subject's counsel. Whereupon your subject gave order to his attorney to cause the demurrer to be made up accordingly.
Right, I'm going to leap in there because it's taken me long enough to understand what's going on, so you may as well have the benefit of my wisdom. First of all, Giles Allen went to common law and brought an action of trespass against Peter Streete and presumably others in the King's Bench, all fair and simple. Then Cuthbert Burbage, who I assume was one of the defendants in the King's Bench trial, went to the Court of Requests. Now, the Court of Requests is a very odd court. It seems to have been set up by Richard III. It had certain similarities to Star Chamber in that it was a prerogative court. That is, it was on the authority of the monarch, not part of the ordinary legal system. And it was intended for very poor people or for the king's servants. And it annoyed the common lawyers very, very much indeed, because it would interfere. We are the queen, you know, we are the monarch's court, and it would interfere in common law proceedings as here. And this really did annoy people. So much so that in the next century, there were massive battles between between equity, which is, I suppose, one way of saying justice, and law, which is what is written down, whether it's just or not. So for law, you have to obey all the rules. For equity, you have to also have clean hands. One of the maxims of equity is he that comes to equity must come with clean hands. But what Burbage has done is he's got somehow out of the Court of Requests from one of the masters of requests. The judges in the Court of Requests weren't the Privy Council, they were a bunch of lawyers called masters, the masters of requests. And he's got an order against King's Bench, halt, go no further with this case until we've sorted out the equity issue. There's a question come up about terms, law terms. Michaelmas starts at Michaelmas, which is in the autumn. Hillary is the next one, isn't it? Which is sort of January time.
Yeah.
Then you've got Easter, and then you've got Trinity, which is the summer one. And after Trinity, you have the long vacation when all the lawyers go home. And there's a tremendous amount of correspondence happens at the beginning of the Michaelmas term when the roads are stuffed with lawyers all going up to London for the start of the term. And what has happened here is that he's, despite the stay on the case, he's put in his demurrer, which is as you know, which is a sort of answer to the case in King's Bench as Alan, and gone back to Essex for his holes. And it's all over till Michaelmas, when it'll all start up again. Okay, are there any more questions or problems or comments or suggestions? Okay, let's go. Reader number 3.
Is it me here? May it please your excellent majesty, Cuthbert Burbage, my deem further to entrap your subject and the intent to circumvent him to his great danger, as the sequel showeth, did very maliciously and fraudulently after that order pronounced as aforesaid, combine and practice with one John Maddox, then his attorney in that suit, and one Richard Lane, the register of that court, and by confederacy as foresaid, procure John Maddox to draw an order, which appertained not to him to do, but unto the registry of the Court of Requests, and likewise procure the same to be entered and set down directly contrary to that, which was delivered and pronounced as aforesaid by your Highness's counsel of that court, namely, that your subject should not proceed to the making up of the demurrer aforesaid, therein abusing your Highness's honourable court and greatly injuring your subject.
Keep going.
Howbeit your subject, having formally given order to his attorney for the making up of the demurrer, nothing doubting but that safely he might so do, being altogether ignorant of the fraudulent and sinister practice and confederacy aforesaid. And your subject's attorney having made up the demurrer, your subject made repair home into the country, thinking all matters should rest in peace till the time appointed for the hearing of the cause.
Keep going.
But Cuthbert Burbage, pursuing his former wicked and ungodly purpose, and seeking to plunge your subject in very grievous and inevitable mischiefs, did, the last day of Trinity term, by the practice and confederation of John Maddox, make oath in your Highness Court of Requests that your subject had broken the order of that court by making up of the demurrer aforesaid. Whereupon, your subject for that supposed contempt was in the vacation time then next following by the procurement of Cuthbert Burbage and by the confederacy aforesaid, fetched up to London by a pursuant to his great vexation and trouble, being a man very aged and unfit to travel, and to his excessive charges in his journey, and otherwise to his great discredit and disgrace in the country. And your subject, being then by the purse even brought before one of the masters of your highness court did, by that master's court order then made, become bound unto Cuthbert Burbage in a bond of £200 to appear in the court of request in the beginning of the term of St. Michael, then next following to answer the supposed contempt, and to stand to the order of that court upon the hearing of the cause. And afterwards your subject at that term appeared in the court accordingly. And the matter aforesaid being opened to your highness counsel, so there your subject was thereupon by order of that court discharged of the supposed contempt.
Okay. So Giles Allen thinks that he has got permission to put in a demurrer, but in fact he hasn't. So Cuthbert Burbage scoots round to the Court of Requests and says, "You'll never guess what that wicked Giles Allen has done now." And they detach a pursuivant and send him off into Essex, to the public shame and humiliation of poor old Giles Allen. And weak, feeble, and on his deathbed as he is, they force him up to London, where either he says, "I'm terribly sorry, it was a misunderstanding," or else he proves that he was right. And he is not charged with contempt, but he has to give a bond that he will appear. That doesn't mean he has to hand over £200. It means that if he doesn't appear, he forfeits £200. And the way he feels about Cuthbert Burbage, he won't want to do that. Have I made it clear, or are we still all baffled? We're there. We're with it. Cuthbert Burbage isn't hesitating. The second he sees an advantage, he's in there. Okay, who's reader number 2?
And afterwards, in the term of St. Michael, at the day appointed for the hearing of the cause of your subject, appearing in your highness court and having diverse witnesses there present to testify viva voce on the behalf of your subject, Cuthbert Burbage and Richard Burbage, still persisting in their unlawful and malicious courses against your subject, did by the confederacy aforesaid, then and there very shamefully and unlawfully revile with many reproachful terms your subjects' witnesses, and affirmed that they had formerly testified in the cause diverse untruths, and threatened to stab some of your subjects' witnesses because they had testified of the fraudulent deed of gift made by James Burbage to Cuthbert Burbage and Richard Burbage as aforesaid, by which their furious and unlawful threats your subjects' witnesses were then so terrified that they durst not testify the truth on the behalf of your subject in the cause.
Well, there we are. What terrible people these Burbages were. Yeah, it's a Star Chamber bill of complaint. Yes, Sarah.
So, I mean, obviously we won't have this, or maybe we do, but I'm assuming we don't. But like, if they had threatened people in this way and sort of menaced them, surely somewhere there would have been testimony from them at the time. I mean, I assume there's no record of any testimony from the people they allegedly threatened with stabbing.
This is a very interesting question, and I haven't a clue what the answer is because I'm only doing Star Chamber. But if anybody wants to be into the Court of Requests or into King's Bench, there may be much more yet to find. On the other hand, there may be nothing. I really don't know. It was a long time ago. And small furry creatures eat vellum. and there are fires. And also in cases like this, there are thieves, because anything connected to the theatre, people wanted to own. So tremendous amounts of stuff got lifted by readers and archivists and people who felt they would be better off if they looked after it than the National Archives. Nowadays, they're a little more careful about stuff going out. But then, of course, you get people like Payne Collier who bring stuff in. He was quite good at adding names, famous names, to otherwise innocuous documents. But there we are. So, yeah, so we've got fraud in avoiding their father's debts. We've now got witness intimidation with violence. Yeah, apart from the riot, in which I quite frankly don't believe, but there we are, other people do. Any more questions, or shall we go on? Let's go on then.
And further, so it is, if it may please your excellent majesty, that Cuthbert Burbage did very maliciously and corruptly, and contrary to the laws and statutes of your highness's realm, suborn and procure one Richard Hudson of the parish of St. Albans in London, carpenter, and Thomas Osborne of the parish of Fenchurch in London, carpenter, to commit very grievous and wilful perjury in your highness's court of requests in divers material points concerning the suit. Richard Hudson testifying and deposing in the suit on the behalf of Cuthbert Burbage that he was present to view an estimate made of the costs bestowed by the aforesaid James Burbage in his lifetime upon the houses and tenements demised into him by your subject, which view was taken the 18th of July in the year of our Lord God 1585 by himself and others, and that then it did appear unto them that that before that time James Burbage had bestowed upon these houses and tenements the sum of £240.
Keep going.
And Thomas Osborne, in like manner, testifying and deposing in the suit on the behalf of Cuthbert Burbage, that he likewise was present at the same view, and that it did then appear that in the 4 or 5 years before that view taken, there had been bestowed upon these houses and tenements by James Burbage the sum of £240, whereas in truth Richard Hudson was not present at any view taken in the year aforesaid, but only at a view taken in the 33rd year of your highness' reign, as by the deposition of Richard Hudson himself heretofore made in your highness' chancery, and there remaining of record, it doth evidently appear. Neither had James Burbage, at the time of the view, supposed to be made on the 18th day of July in the year of our Lord God 1586, bestowed anything near the sum of £240, whereof your subject hopeth he shall be able to make very sufficient proof.
Keep going.
By which unlawful practices of Cuthbert Burbage, your subject then did lose his cause.
Okay, so that's the court of requests. He was hoping to prove stuff, but all his witnesses were intimidated, and the Burbage's witnesses perjured themselves, and he lost. And this was a court of equity. I don't know. What's justice coming to? Rachael.
What is perjury again? I know we have it in the United States, but I've never had to
Perjury
deal.
is taking an oath to tell the truth and then lying. Or not fulfilling the oath, yeah. Sarah.
Do we know what the consequence was to him? as a result of this, of losing his case?
Well, I imagine there were costs, but there wouldn't be a penalty except that he had lost all the timber that went to build the globe.
Right.
But he'd been hailed out of his vacation. He'd been hauled home. His witnesses who he had managed to gather together had all been insulted and threatened. And he'd lost the case. So as far as that's concerned, I think losing is important thing. We've got a question here in chat. What is a view in this case? If there was a question of whether a house was in good repair, or a question of how much had been spent on it, today you would get a building surveyor or a quantity surveyor or something to come in and write a report. But there they'd got a couple of joiners to come along and say, yep, definitely he must have spent £240 on this, which is £40 more than he needed to. Greg is shaking his head.
No, it's not shaking your head at what you say. It was just what you were saying, but I just find it so incredible what the lengths they went to.
Yes, I mean, if you're in dispute with your landlord about a repair, you would bring in someone who understands it, who was mutually agreed between you. I mean, we still do that now to an extent. Eric.
But then, like, as by the deposition of Richard Hudson himself, heretofore made in your Highness Chancery. So basically, this is like cross-court things as well, right?
I don't know. I just don't know what that Chancery reference is. I really, really don't know what that's, where that's popped up from. But I mean, both sides bring in witnesses and you see which one lies best. I don't think there was a jury here. I think it was just the masters of requests would sit on it. So things are looking a bit iffy for poor old Giles Allen. I mean, it'll learn him to let someone put a theatre up on his land. Okay. Are we, sorry, did I miss anyone else waving, or shall we go on? Let's go on then.
And further so it is, may it please your excellent majesty, that as well the suit between your subject and Streete, as also the suit between your subject and Cuthbert Burbage, were persecuted against your subject by the malicious procurement and the unlawful maintenance of the aforesaid William Smyth. He, William, unlawfully maintaining those suits for Cuthbert Burbage, then unlawfully expending and laying out divers sums of money in the same for and in the behalf of Cuthbert Burbage, contrary to the laws and statutes of this your highness realm, and to the great prejudice of your subject.
Okay, let's pause there, because we have in other cases come across maintenance, the carrying on or the supporting or the funding of cases in which you do not have a legitimate interest. Now, who is William Smyth? William Smyth is funding all this litigation for the Burbages. Is he a theatre fan? I mean, who knows? I mean, he's one of those murky people like Hyde and Brain who appear to pop up. I mean, a good theatre historian might be able to identify him, but identifying people called William Smyth is very often quite difficult. After John, William was about as popular as it got. And there are and always have been a lot of Smyths. Right, let's read to the end of the bill.
Right. In consideration whereof, and for that the riot, routs, forcible entries, confederacy, abuse of justice, maintenance, and other the misdemeanours aforesaid are contrary to your highness's laws, statutes, and ordinances ordained and established for the quiet and happy government of this your highness's realm, and are not only very deleterious onto your subject, but also very dangerous to the example of others. Sorry, very dangerous in example to others, if such and so found misdemeanours should escape their due and condign punishment.
May it therefore please your excellent majesty, the premises considered to grant unto your subject, your highness most gracious writ of subpoena, to be directed unto Cuthbert Burbage, Richard Burbage, Peter Streete, William Smyth, Richard Lane, Richard Hudson, and Thomas Osborne, commanding them and every of them thereby on a certain day and under a certain pain therein to be limited personally to be and appear before your majesty's most honourable privy council in your highness most honourable court of Star Chamber to answer to the misdemeanours aforesaid. And your subject shall, according to his bounden duty, daily pray to Almighty God for your excellent majesty's long life and prosperous reign.
Splendid. I think we may as well proceed directly to the answer unless anybody wants to say anything. Right, here we go. The joint and several answers and pleas of Cuthbert Burbage, Richard Burbage, Peter Streete, and William Smyth, 4 of the defendants of the bill of complaint of Giles Allen, gentleman, the complainant.
The said defendants, by protestation not acknowledged nor confessing any of the matters in the said bill, contain to be true, saying that the bill of complaint exhibited against them and others into this most honorable court is very uncertain and insufficient in the law to be answered unto for diverse and sundry faults and manifest imperfections therein, appearing such as by the laws of this realm and orders of this honorable court, these defendants are not tied to make any answer unto.
And namely, whereas the said complainant doth charge these defendants in his said bill for a riot by then committed and pulling down of the said playhouse called the theatre, and for taking and carrying away thence the wood and timber thereof, which playhouse was builded and erected upon certain grounds there thentofore demised unto him that said James Burbage in the said bill of complaint, named by the complainant and his wife by their indenture of lease under their hands and seals for the term of divers years then to come. The said complainant having for that cause in Hillary term next following the said supposed riot commenced an action of trespass against Peter Streete, and the said Cuthbert Burbage being 2 of the now defendants in her majesty's court called to the King's Bench at Westminster. And the defendant Cuthbert Burbage being assignee of the premises, and being well able in good conscience and equity to justify the pulling down, using and disposing of the wood and timber of the said playhouse, although by law, by reason of the complainant's own wrong and breach of covenant, he had no sufficient matter to allege in bar of the said action. This defendant Cuthbert Burbage did, for his relief and stay of the unjust proceedings of the complainant in the action, exhibit his bill of complaint unto your majesty before your highness council in your honorable court of Whitehall against the complainant, unto which bill the now complainant appeared and answered, and this defendant, Cuthbert, replied, and diverse witnesses were examined on both sides. Publication granted, and several days appointed for the hearing thereof.
And upon the open hearing and full and deliberate debating of the cause, it plainly appeared unto your majesty's council that James Burbage had well and truly, for his part, performed and kept all and singular the covenants contained in the indenture, and that the now complainant refusing to seal a new lease of the premises, tendered unto him by James Burbage according to a covenant in the indenture of the lease, on the now complainant's part to be performed contrary to his own agreement, through his own wrong and breach of covenant, sought to hinder this defendant, Cuthbert, having the interest of the premises, to take the benefit of the agreements in taking away the playhouse, being made and erected by James Burbage at his charge, according to the covenant. Therefore, it seemed unto your majesty's said council that there was good cause in equity to stay the now complainant's proceedings in the action of the common law.
Can I just put in a word about counsel? Counsel meaning lawyer, as in counsel for the defence, and counsel as in privy council were both being spelt the same way, any way you happen to please. Now, I am pretty certain that the Privy Council, as in the Queen's Council, did not appear in the Court of Requests, and that what we're talking about is a senior lawyer or a lawyer employed in the court by the Queen, rather than the actual Privy Council who were the judges in Star Chamber cases. But it's extremely difficult sometimes because, as I say, they're never spelt the same way twice, but there's no distinction to be made between a council and my council, as there is today. Okay.
So in this next line that I've got, Your Highness's said council, that they are talking about a legal counsel there.
I think they're talking about a lawyer. Yeah, I really do. But I'd hate to go into the witness box on it.
And thereupon, it appearing to your highness, said counsel, the defendant Cuthbert, for divers reasons, had just cause to be relieved in the premises. It was by your highness, said counsel, the 18th day of October, in the 42nd year of your majesty's reign, ordered, judged, and decreed that the now complainant, his counsellors, attorneys, and solicitors, should from thenceforth surcease and stay, and no further prosecute or proceed at the common law in the action of trespass so commenced against Peter Streete for that cause, and that the now complainant, nor any for him, or by his consent or procurement, should at any time commence, or cause to be commenced, any other action or suit against this defendant Cuthbert, or any of his servants or assignees, for or concerning the pulling down of the playhouse, or for carrying away the timber thereof, that this defendant Cuthbert should be at liberty to take his remedy at and by the course of your highness common laws against the now complainant for not agreeing to seal the new lease according to a covenant on the now complainant's part to be performed in the indentures expressed as, amongst other things, in the judicial decree, and sentence of that court more at large it to doth and may appear.
Keep going.
For which cause and for that the now complainant had not showed any cause of grief for any fraud or indirect practices or dealing by this defendant supposed to be used, or by any of the officers of your Highness Court, in drawing or entering of orders contrary to those your Highness said counsel had before being pronounced in that cause, or for any practice in any of these defendants for procuring the same, as he and by his bill of complaint doth falsely and untruly surmise. And for that the complainant doth offer great scandal and abuse to your Highness said counsel, by calling the same matter again into question, and in laboring to have the said matter, to have the said cause after such judicial sentence and decree passed against the honorable court to be again re-examined before your Majesty court. Therefore, and for diverse other defects, faults, and imperfections in the bill of complaint upon this appearing, but these defendants do demur in law upon the said bill, and demand the judgment of this honorable court, if they or any of them ought to make any other answer thereto, and humbly pray to be dismissed with their reasonable costs herein wrongfully sustained.
So what the defense is, this whole thing was settled in the Court of Requests. I don't know what the complainant thinks he's doing bringing it up again. Yeah. All right, Sarah.
I'm beginning to get a sense here that he cannot let this go. Like, this is just something that, you know, maybe someone already has, but you could write a play about this, because, like, beneath these bare bones, you get the impression that here is a man who feels he's been wronged and he's been shamed and he's been tricked by these young whippersnappers, and he just, you know, won't let it go now. I don't know if that's what's actually going on, but certainly maybe that's one interpretation, you know, if you take some artistic license.
Elizabethans were irrepressibly litigious, far more than we are today. Well, certain Americans accepted. Okay, now we're now going on to the second answer, second demurrer. A demurrer is where you're saying there's no case to answer, fundamentally. And we'll read this straight through because it's quite short. Everybody ready? Yes, they are. The joint and several demurrers of Richard Hudson and Thomas Osborne, two of the defendants to the bill of complaint of Giles Allen, gentleman, the complainant.
The said defendants, by protestation, not acknowledging nor confessing any of the matters in the said bill contained be true, saying that the said bill of complaint exhibited against them and others in this honorable court is very untrue and slanderous, uncertain, and insufficient in the law to be answered unto, for diverse and sundry faults and manifest imperfections therein appearing, and such as by the laws of this realm and orders of this honorable court. They, these defendants, are not tied to make any answer thereunto.
And namely, for that the matters and supposed perjury in the said bill contained wherewith these defendants do stand charged are therein so uncertainly and insufficiently laid as these defendants under the favour of this honourable court cannot and are not tied to make any further answer thereunto.
And these defendants further say that other of the defendants in the said bill of complaint named, having been heretofore served with a process, have appeared and demurred upon the same bill, which demurrer being referred by the order of this honourable court to the right worshipful Francis Bacon, Esquire, he, upon perusal and consideration, had of the said bill of complaint hath already reported that the said bill is very uncertain and insufficient, and that no further answer needeth to be made thereto.
For which causes and diverse other matters and defects in the said bill appearing, that they, the defendants, do demur in law upon the said bill of complaint, and praying to be dismissed out of this honorable court with their reasonable costs and charges them in the most wrongfully borne and sustained.
Well, there's a surprise guest. Who saw him coming? I know Greg did because he'd read through it before.
I did not see that coming. So what is his connection? How is he involved?
Well, he needed a day job. I mean, the poor fellow, Essex, he'd had to withdraw from because he was living very, very dangerously. The Cecils, who were his mother and William Cecil's wife were, well, William, yeah, it'd be Robert Cecil by this time, William was dead. And Robert Cecil's mother were sisters, and he expected patronage from the Cecils, which he did not get. And he had tried desperately with the help of Essex to become Attorney General, failing that to become Solicitor General. He had failed on practically anything, but he had managed to get a clerkship in Star Chamber. And here he is doing his day job. Who knew?
Who knew?
Did not expect him to turn up. I mean, I dived into the Dictionary of National Biography and various other places when I found this to make sure that it was the same guy, but it is.
Wow.
Because there are a lot of Bacons in Norfolk, and a number of them are called Francis, but this is the very man. Didn't expect him. I've never heard of him being involved in this. But what he did was, it's an interesting example of what happens in Star Chamber, because as a lawyer, a clerk in Star Chamber, but he was a lawyer, he went through the paperwork and he said, yeah, you don't have to answer this. A demurrer will do. There's nothing here that needs a proper answer.
It's really extraordinary, though, that they name him and that he just happens to crop up in this case.
Yeah. Maybe they were impressed by him. Maybe they'd read some of his odd stuff which was circulating in manuscript. Maybe they'd seen one of his plays. Apparently he wrote a very neat play, I assume in Latin. Yeah. London was a much smaller place than it is now. But I mean, I think if they'd said one of the clerks advised us, it would not have been as good as having said which of the clerks. Aha. I'm delighted to be able to inform you that Eric has been in the TNA catalogue, which used to be called ProCat, but they're calling it something else now. And he has turned up a case in the Court of Request document. Why it is dated 1632, I don't know. I imagine that has to be an error because it's certainly the same case. So the Court of Request case does exist. Oh dear, another one to add to my list next time I'm at the National Archives. Good. Have we exhausted Francis Bacon and our surprise at seeing him there? Right, so nothing is looking good for Giles Allen. However, we now come to Richard Lane, who is the Deputy Register of the Court of Requests. And in the bill, he is accused of fraud. He is accused of substituting, changing the order so that the original order said he can put in a demurrer and then the action is stayed to the action is stayed, which is why Cuthbert Burbage was able to send the pursuivant out into the sticks to arrest him on holiday in the bosom of his family. And this was entirely down to the appalling behaviour of Richard Lane, the Deputy Register of the Court of Requests. And it's a serious matter for him. So here is the answer of Richard Lane, and let's go straight through it.
This defendant saving to himself, now and at all times hereafter, all advantages and exceptions to the uncertainties and insufficiencies of the bill of complaint for answer and plain declaration of the truth, this defendant saith, that true it is that there was a suit commenced in Her Majesty's Honourable Court of Whitehall at Westminster, with one Cuthbert Burbage complainant against Giles Allen defendant, concerning the stay of a suit which Giles Allen had then depending in Her Majesty's Court of King's Bench against Cuthbert Burbage or his servant, touching the playhouse called the Theatre, in which court this defendant, then and yet serving as Deputy Register, did to the best of his understanding, and with as much knowledge and diligence as he could attend, and took such brief notes of orders as from time to time Her Majesty's counsel in the said court pronounced in the cause, without any affection to either of the said parties.
Amongst which, upon the 31st of May, in the 42nd year of Her Majesty's most happy reign, the matter being moved and opened in presence of Master Sergeant Harris and Master Walter, being severally of counsel learned with both the parties, it was thereupon to the best of this defendant's remembrance ordered by consent of the parties that the matter should be set over to be heard in the court upon the 5th day of the next term, and in the meantime the defendant should stay his suit at the common law and no further proceed therein.
And it was also then further ordered that Giles Allen, making oath that he was not privy to the depositions published and setting down the names of the deponents which he intended to examine, should be at liberty to examine the deponents so to be named until the 2nd day of the next term, and then the same to be published, as by a note remaining in a book of remembrances then taken and kept by this defendant appeareth. Upon the copy of which note, so conceived and delivered by this defendant, John Maddox, named in the bill, being attorney for the said Burbage, or some of his clerks, or some other on the behalf of Cuthbert Burbage, did draw up an order at large, touching the cause, subscribed and confirmed by one of Her Majesty's Council of the Court, as by the same ready to be showed unto this honourable court may appear, and brought the same into the Register's office to be entered, which accordingly was done. And this defendant further saith, that if John Maddox, or any other who had the drawing of the said order, did add or diminish anything material to or from the said order more or less than was pronounced, it concerneth them in their oaths and credit, and not this defendant, who did nothing therein more than he has good warrant to do.
And this defendant further saith that the attorneys of the said Court of Whitehall, being sworn in their places to observe the orders and due proceedings of the said court, have for the space of 30 years last past, to the knowledge of this defendant, for so long he has served as a clerk in the same court, and long before as he hath heard, and doth verily believe to be true, the attorneys used to draw their clients' orders, being sworn to deal indifferently therein. And it was not done by the Register, as Giles Allen in his bill hath untruly alleged, especially such as do concern decrees or orders made for the granting of injunctions for stay of first day of any proceedings at the common law, dismissions of causes, delivery out of money, or delivery of writings, or for the establishing of any possession or any and such like, as are confirmed before the entering thereof by and under the hand of or hands of some of her Majesty's Council of the Court, before they be entered into the register. And for the other short orders, they are now usually entered by the register or his deputy without any further circumstance or contradiction.
And whereas the said complainant in his bill of complaint hath slanderously and untruly set down that Cuthbert Burbage did very maliciously and fraudulently, after the order was pronounced, combine and practice with John Maddox, his attorney, and with this defendant, the deputy register, and by that confederacy procure John Maddox to draw an order, and likewise procure the same order to be entered and set down, directly contrary to that which was done and pronounced by her Highness Council of the said court, namely that Giles Allen should not proceed to the making up of the demurrer, therein very highly abusing your Highness said honorable court and greatly injuring Giles Allen now complainant.
The defendant for plea and answer thereunto, and every other matter of misdemeanor, confederacy, and combination laid to this defendant's charge in the said bill, saith that he is thereof and of every part thereof not guilty. Without that this defendant had at any time directly or indirectly practiced, combine, or confederate with Cuthbert Burbage and John Maddox, or either of them, or with any other person or persons whatsoever about the drawing or procuring of the said order to be entered, but did faithfully and sincerely take the note of the said order as the same was pronounced to his best understanding in such form as is before recited. And the same subscribed as aforesaid was truly entered into the register accordingly, and without that any other matter or thing in the said bill of complaint contained touching or concerning this defendant material to be answered unto, and not herein sufficiently answered, confessed, avoided, traversed, or denied is true. All which matters this defendant is ready to aver and prove as this honourable court should award. And humbly prays to be dismissed out of the same, with his costs and charges in this behalf most wrongfully had and sustained.
Good. Well, that is the end of the reference. So you've got a bill and 3 answers. But there is also Allen v. Lane, Giles Allen and Richard Lane, which was separated, but I have brought them in. I've searched all the Giles Allen, all the Lane, all the Streete, I've searched every name, but this Richard Lane one is certainly a part of it. And so we've got the interrogatories and the depositions. So this is the last lap. We've got we're piling on 3 clerks and one poor deponent, Richard Lane. So if we're all ready, we'll go straight through with them. Interrogatories to be ministered to Richard Lane, one of the defendants in the suit of Giles Allen complainant, and Richard Lane's depositions in answer.
Do you know that a bill was exhibited in Her Majesty's Court of Requests by Cuthbert Burbage against Giles Allen, the complainant, for the staying of a suit which the complainant had commenced in Her Majesty's Bench at Westminster against one Peter Streete for the pulling down of the playing place called the theatre?
I think that there was a bill exhibited in Her Majesty's Court of Request by Cuthbert Burbage, plaintiff against the now complainant, then the defendant, for the stay of the suit of a suit which the now complainant had commenced in Her Majesty's Bench at Westminster concerning the theatre, and I refer myself to the records of that court.
Do you know that it was ordered by the Court of Requests by an order made the last day of May in the 42nd year of Her Majesty's reign? The suit between the complainant and Peter Streete should be stayed. And did the court then give liberty by the order unto the complainant to join up the demurrer that was depending between the complainant and Peter Streete in the suit? Or did the court restrain the complainant from doing so?
To my remembrance, it was ordered by the Court of Requests that the last of May in the 42nd year of Her Majesty's reign, amongst other things in presence of Master Sergeant Harris and Master Walter, being severally of counsel with both parties and by their consents, that the suit at the common law between Cuthbert Burbage and Giles Allen should be stayed, and that I, being Deputy Register of that court, receiving an order subscribed by one of Her Majesty's counsel in that court to that effect, to which order I shall refer myself, and more I cannot say to this interrogatory.
Did you enter the order truly in such a manner as it was delivered by the court? And did you deliver a true copy unto the complainant, not altering or omitting anything that was then delivered and pronounced by the court?
To my best remembrance, I took a note of the said order as it was pronounced, and thereof delivered a true copy to the complainant or some other on the complainant's behalf, without adding or diminishing anything to or from the same.
Did you, upon the said last day of May, deliver unto the complainant a copy of an order dated the said last day of May, and did you therein set down that it was ordered by consent that the complainant should stay his further proceeding at the common law in the suit there depending against Cuthbert Burbage, who is the plaintiff in that court of requests, and whether did you in that copy make any mention that the court had given liberty to the complainant to join up the demurrer, or that the court had ordered that he should not join it up, or did you not altogether omit the same?
I delivered unto the complainant, or to someone on his behalf, a note of an order dated the last of May for to Eli's reign, but whatever the same was delivered the day of the date thereof or not, I do not know. But I say that it was set down in the same order as I remember that the complainant should stay his further proceedings at the common law in the suit depending against Cuthbert Burbage, the plaintiff in the said court of requests. And as touching the joining up of the demurrer in the interrogatory mentioned, I do not know that I made any mention in my note touching the same.
Did not Giles Allen, the now complainant, come unto you the same last of May in the afternoon and show you a note from his counsel, testifying that the court had by their order given him liberty to join up the demurrer? And did not the complainant then desire you that the order might be so entered, according as in truth it had been delivered by the court the same day? And had you received any order the said last day of May between the now complainant and Cuthbert Burbage, under the hand of any of the masters of the court of requests, before the complainant came unto you and required you to reform the copy which you had delivered him?
I do not remember that upon the last day of May in the 42nd year of Her Majesty's reign, in the afternoon of the same day, or at any other time, that Giles Allen did show unto me any note from his counsel testifying that the court had by their order given him liberty to join up the demurrer. Neither do I remember that the complainant desired that the order might be so entered, but if the complainant had, yet nevertheless I would take no notice thereof from his counsel, but enter the same as it was pronounced by the court and as it was confirmed unto the hand of one of Her Majesty's counsel of the same court.
Did you enter an order bearing date the said last day of May, and therein amongst other things set down that the complainant should surcease and stay, and no further prosecute or proceed in the action, depending at the common law, and should not cause the demurrer aforesaid to be joined up or entered until the hearing of the cause in the Court of Requests? And were you procured or moved by John Maddox, the attorney of Cuthbert Burbage, and Cuthbert Burbage, or either of them, to enter the order in such manner? And what sum of money or other recompense did Cuthbert Burbage, or any for him, give unto you, or any other to your use, for making the entry and for the copy thereof?
There was an order delivered into the office to be entered by John Maddox or some other on the behalf of Cuthbert Burbage, dated the last of May, and subscribed by one of Her Majesty's Counsel of the Court of Requests, purporting the stay of the suit, which I did afterwards cause to be entered into the register according to my warrant. And as touching the receiving of any money or other recompense or promise of any from Burbage or Maddox, or any in their behalf, other than the ordinary fees due to the register for the same, I deny the receipt of any money or other consideration whatsoever.
Did you deliver unto the complainant a copy of any such order, and when was any such copy first delivered by you unto the complainant? And did you give any knowledge unto the complainant that the court had ordered that he should not join up the demurrer?
After the receipt of the order so subscribed, it was lawful for me to deliver copies to any person or persons that would require the same. But how many copies or to whom the same were delivered or when, I do not remember. Neither do I remember that I gave any notice to the plaintiff otherwise than the order doth purport.
Do you know that upon the 11th day of June in the 42nd year of Her Majesty's reign, Cuthbert Burbage made oath in the Court of Requests that the now complainant had caused his demurrer to be joined up, contrary to the order of the court, and did not the Cuthbert Burbage thereupon, in the vacation then following, procure a pursuivant to be sent down into the country for the complainant? And was not the complainant brought up to London by the pursuivant, and carried before one of the masters of the Court of Requests, and then enforced to enter into a bond of £200 to appear in that court the first day of Michaelmas term following, to answer the contempt, and also to stand to the order of the court upon the hearing of the cause, or otherwise to have been committed to prison?
As to this interrogatory, I cannot depose.
Did not the complainant appear in the court according to his bond? And was it not then opened unto the court and testified by the complainant's counsel that by the true order made the said last day of May, the complainant had liberty given him by the court to join up the demurrer, and that the court was much abused, and the complainant much wronged by the practice of Cuthbert Burbage and John Maddox and the register? And was it not the complainant thereupon discharged of the supposed contempt?
As touching the appearance of Giles Allen, I refer myself to the book of appearances kept in that behalf, and as touching the discharge of the Giles Allen, his contempt or some other motion made or order taken, I refer myself to the book of orders kept in that behalf.
Did not the counsel of the complainant make a motion in the Court of Requests after hearing of the cause between Giles Allen, the complainant, and Cuthbert Burbage to this effect: that the said Cuthbert Burbage was no assign of the theatre in law or equity from James Burbage deceased, late father to Cuthbert, and therefore Cuthbert Burbage was not able to maintain any bill in his own name touching the same? And did not the counsel of the complainant draw a case accordingly and put it into the court by license of the court?
Sorry. I think that there was motion made to the effect following: that Cuthbert Burbage was no assignee of the theatre in law or equity unto James Burbage deceased, late father Cuthbert Burbage, and therefore he was not able to maintain any bill in his own name touching the same. There was a copy directed onto the court under the hand of, by the direction of Her Majesty's Counsel of the Court of Requests and Master Sergeant Harris being of counsel with the Giles Allen, which I am ready to show to this honourable court.
Was it not ordered by the court by an order dated the 5th day of November in the 42nd year of Her Majesty's reign, upon the motion of the complainant's counsel, that the decree following in the that the decree pronounced in the cause between the complainant and Cuthbert Burbage should be stayed from signing until the case as aforesaid, put in by the complainant's counsel and touching the cause, should be further considered of by Her Majesty's Council of the Court.
From the 5th of November 42, Elizabeth Regina, it was ordered by motion of the Plaintiffs' Counsel that the decree procured in the cause between the complainant and Cuthbert Burbage should be stayed from signing till the case were further considered of.
Right. Poor old Richard Lane got caught between two, got caught up in the crossfire. I love the way we hear about all these records. A book of appearances, book of this, book of that, book of orders. It's marvelous. I wonder if they all still exist. We've got a book of orders for Star Chamber, but it's massively unhelpful. Sarah.
It's very full on, isn't it? I mean, you know, we've done this before. I was doing one earlier today with you, where we had the interrogatories, and you know, you get all these questions, but I don't know, for some reason this one in particular seems to be really full on. They are really trying to kind of nail him to the wall, and I mean, you really get the impression that he's sort of his answers are very kind of you know, sober and methodical, and you know, he answers all the questions, but like, I don't know, you can imagine with somebody who wasn't, anyone who was kind of vaguely panicky or disorganized or whatever would have trouble with all of that, because it felt that like they were really going after him.
It's the only set of depositions that have survived. I don't say there weren't others, but these are the only ones that have survived. I mean, there may not have been others. Rachael.
No, I was just gonna say, it looks like I don't know, like was it Giles? Was it I want to say Giles, but Giles, is it Giles who's the one that brings this up for him? Yes. I feel like he's really clutching at whatever straws he can to try and get this collect this debt from the deceased man, and feeling this stuff with all the people that he brings into it, that he's even going after a clerk of one of the courts. And to what Sarah said about his sort of reservedness, or like, you know, pulling back, is he's very much, I think, you know, he knows the legalese, and he knows how to say things and what to say. And I don't think it's, in this legal case, I think it's nobody's first rodeo, because Giles has brought the Burbages through court so many times, and he's going against a clerk. And there's just so much, I don't know, it's just interesting.
Yeah, nobody's first rodeo is going into my lexicon. I hadn't heard that before. Okay, any more? Are we all utterly, completely and totally exhausted by this? Eric keeps on putting more and more cases. Good heavens, more and more and more cases, and good heavens, yes. Eric, you're going to have to put them all in an email to me. I can't cope.
Okay, I will have to hunt them all down. 'cause
But I'm not,
Yeah.
I could make no promises that I will follow this up. This is for theatre historians, not for Star Chamber. Sarah.
Sorry, all these cases, they're all about the same complaint, basically. It's all about Alan versus Burbages and taking down the timber.
Well, there's one here which is in Exchequer. And you've got it, yeah, it can be quite hard work to get a case in Exchequer. The Earl of Rutland is claiming some of the ground. On which the theatre was built. So, yeah, there's a lot more there to be discovered.
Wow.
It's all go, but it won't have Francis Bacon in it.
Nobody
Rachael.
expects Francis Bacon.
No, I was just gonna say, I think this is why you can't, why we, specifically for people like Giles Allen, is why in American law, there's that, that thing where it's like, you can't be tried twice for the same thing. Even though I think
we
lawsuits
used to have
defy
that.
Yeah, our
We-
lawsuits defy that.
It's a good tradition of the Anglo-American legal tradition, but we no longer have it. But this is, the Star Chamber case is criminal in that these are misdemeanors. The others are civil cases.
Yeah, I was going to say, does that apply to civil suits? I'm not sure if it does or not.
I'm sure that if the thing has been once round the courts, unless you're heading for the Supreme Court, you've got to show very different facts or very new evidence. But I'm not sure what the current position is. The other, one of the maxims that I was caught is de minimis non curat lex. The law does not concern itself with trifles, which is rather nice. Well, I think we've pretty much come to an end, and there's a certain number of rather exhausted looking readers. Any final thoughts? No, don't shake your head at me, Greg. You're the one that this is this is your Christmas present.
Oh, thank you, Helen. No, I've really enjoyed it. Though horrendously difficult to read, very, very, you've got to get your tongue around the wording. And it's amazing. I'm sure I changed the meaning of sentences without really meaning to, because I swapped a word around or something, or put a different word in. It still came to life. It's still this thought that is this group of people, whether they be riotous actors, and God, they're a noisy lot, or a bunch of people who were more likely to get the thing down properly, actually did this. I still find it incredible, 400 years later, sorry, however long later, that this actually happened. December, of course, perfect time of the year, because at least they got a good chance the Thames might be frozen, or enough that they could nick it across the river, because how the heck did they get all this wood across the river otherwise?
Barges.
And the fact that, it's the Globe that then gets built. Not just any old theatre, and all the theatres were lovely at that point, I'm sure, but it's the Globe that was rebuilt. That glorious space. But yeah, no, fascinating. And I feel sorry for everybody in it, because they all got done by the end, it seemed, in one way, shape or form.
Yes, I think the Burbages came out quite well, because they've got a theatre. But they don't seem to have had much in the way of spare cash. Who's next? with a final thought. Sarah.
This is pure speculation on my part. I can't help myself. I just wonder with Francis Bacon, like he's saying, "Oh yeah, there's not enough here. This should just be, you know, thrown out, or it would be, you know, that's what they would say today, thrown out of court." I mean, was he entirely objective? I mean, because as you said, London was a small place. I wonder if he kind of, and you know, he was a man of sort of learning who appreciated the arts. I wonder if he had not skin in the game exactly, but whether he had a secret preference that kind of, you know, swayed his opinion.
Except that I think his opinion is correct by everything I've read. I mean, it isn't corrupt if you do the right thing, even if you enjoy doing it.
True.
Rachel, anything more to add?
No, I feel bad for the guy that the debt was abated, because that's gotta suck, but he chased it, you know, legally he didn't have anything after a while. Like once it went to the sons and he gave it to them while he was living, and he gave the debt to the widow, you know, in the will, then it wasn't his, and he just kept at it. And I feel bad for the random guy Lane, the random clerk who gets pulled into all of it. And apparently every other court in the land that gets roped into it as well.
And finally, Eric.
Yeah, it's fascinating also when you start, well, because I've been nerding over the database now. I should really stop doing that. But it's just sort of that thing of, I don't know, when you start connecting the dots and seeing sort of, I don't know, like doing something like this nowadays is impossible, of course. But I mean, tracing those like connections between people in the theater at the time, or people outside the theater, you know, just like sort of personages, is fascinating. Just like sort of, it's basically like world building, but for real people.
I'd love to know who William Smyth was.
Yeah,
I really would like to know. Maybe somebody does. Anyway, I am once again incredibly grateful to you, because you have helped me to unravel what was a somewhat murky corner. But it's time to go, so it only remains for me to thank our wonderful readers and require you all, according to your bounden duty, to pray to Almighty God for the Queen's long life and prosperous reign. Goodbye.